Okay, I think we can start because we are 70 people now.
I think we can start.
Okay, let's go. Welcome to our second session of the Agile Week for this special event organized by PMI Luxembourg Chapter with Intrasoft Alvison and our core volunteers and board of directors to reflect on the Agile 20th anniversary. My name is Eloise Levot. I'm the Director of Members and Volunteer for the Luxembourg chapter, and I would be your host today. As some of you may already know, this event is going to be recorded. So please be aware of that. We will not have any slide share after, but the recording is going to be available. I would like to welcome our speaker, Konstantinos. We'll go through his bio in a couple of minutes. And I would like, before the start, to discuss a little bit of what is the chapter about. We are part of the Project Management Institute as the local branch of the PMI. We are a small but very active chapter. We committed to a series of activities that offer to our members the opportunity to participate and to grow in the profession, but also to maintain their certification in good health. So we have 16 hours of event per year minimum, normally a little bit more. We collaborate with several companies and government bodies in Luxembourg. And we have a very active cross-border chapter collaboration. We are a volunteer-based association, so every activities we do it on volunteer basis. This goes from the event organization to the board members to every activities that you see, marketing, etc., goes on voluntary basis. In 2021, we have a massive pipeline of activities. We are in full in our Agile Week, 9 sessions in 5 days, lunchtime. The first 2 days are already booked, but you can still connect to the last 3 days of the events. Campfire events, those are user experience workshops. Upcoming dates to be still defined, but Campfire are on 3 monthly basis. Navigate the phases of team development with spin and agility, cybersecurity, building organization resilience. As you can see, there's a lot of topics that might be of interest for you. And to stay in touch with us, we have a brand new webpage, which is pmi.lu. We have a LinkedIn page and a LinkedIn group where you can get to know what's going on in the latest events that are going to come. What are the volunteer position? When is the board of directors going to be re-elected, and so on and so forth? A very active Twitter account. And of course, you can reach us every time you want by email. Our addresses are pretty easy to remember. The President's Events Communication at PMI.lu, and of course, sponsorship, membership, volunteers. When you want to join us, we are here for you, and we are really, really willing to keep in touch with whoever wants to be in touch with us. Main sponsor for today is Intrasoft. Event partner is Alvison. We really, really thank them for their engagement and to help us to have this massive organization, which is, to be frank, a little bit surprising, the size of the events we reached to organize for such a small chapter. And we are really, really proud of how this first day is going. And just for you to know, if you are a member, you have a special offer on the discipline and agile trainings, 10% off, and a very limited amount of very limited number of places. So please write it to me if you are curious about it. And our main sponsor as chapter are Price, and supporters are Chambre de Commerce, Deloitte, Info Europe, and EUI. And that's the sponsor framework, which I would skip. If you are curious about getting to know what are the framework for the sponsorship, please write to us. It's probably easier. Thank you, and we can go to the. So I'm gonna stop the the screen share, and I will go to introduce our speaker. Of course, if my laptop decide to collaborate, which is always the issue here. Sorry for that. Okay. Our very, very, very patient speaker today is Kazimir Konstantinos, is project and contract manager at EUIPO, and is leader of IT governance team. Sorry, I'm losing my.
Don't worry, Elise, I can take it up from here.
Yes, I think it's pretty easier for you to introduce yourself rather than for me to remember everything.
Of course. Let me share my screen in the meantime.
Yes.
And you tell me if everything looks fine. Can you see the screen, the presentation?
Yes, it is.
Okay, good. Okay, I take the floor then.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So my name is Konstantinos KARMIRIS, or Kostas KARMIRIS, quicker, faster. And for the last 9 years, I have been working in the European Union Intellectual Property Office, located in Alicante, working for the Digital Transformation Department. I'm an IT professional with almost 20 years of working experience in multicultural environments, both in the private sector and in the European public sector. The fact that I have extended experience in both as a provider and as the client has helped me a lot appreciate better the problems and opportunities lying on both ends of the client-provider relationship, to put it like that. Among others, I lead the IT governance team here in the IT department, engaging with areas related to planning, management of demand, budget, Sdlc, change management, contracting, management of external vendors, and so on. And today, I'm going to talk about our experience in practicing Agile methodologies in the EUIPO, and also mention briefly where we stand with our transformation journey, which we set off quite recently to go from project management to product management. And so keep a note on this term, the product management, because it will be very relevant during the presentation. So let's start. Okay, now. All right. I'm sure that most of you, you are very well aware of this famous triangle of the project constraints, right? The cost, scope, and time. And of course, we don't forget the other two important factors of it, which are quality and benefits. I'm not going to spend more time on this, but it's, let's say, the starting point for what I want to discuss later on. So what is our starting point in this transformation journey that I just mentioned? We start off from the traditional project management approach, or waterfall as you know it. This is, of course, a plan-driven approach which focuses on predictability, and we work, let's say, on a fixed scope with time and cost constraints being the estimates, let's say. And usually these are the two constraints that they suffer when there are deviations. The process, let's say, in this management approach is mostly linear and rigid with clear quality gates. So control passes from one provider to the other, since we are outsourcing lots of our services in the SDLC. And this is, let's say, depicted in this simple diagram on the bottom right of the slide. So the SDLC in this type of waterfall management is first analysis, then design, then the build phase, testing, of course, and release. This being linear means that there is an increased risk that what is implemented in the end might not finally meet what is actually required. And especially in big projects that they may take 1 or 2 years, you can imagine that what you, as an end user, what you see in the end may not have nothing to do with what you expected or what you specified a couple of years ago. Or even it may be what you expected, but let's say the requirements have changed in the meantime because of new opportunities, changes in the legal framework, you name it. On the other hand, in this type of management methodology, outsourcing is more straightforward, I would say, because there is a clear separation of concerns, duties, to call it like that, between the providers, and also it is easier to set up a clear SLA and measure the service provider's performance in a fixed price mode, let's say. Now, where do we want to go in this transformation journey? We want to go, of course, to agile management. And as you see, I have the word ideal in parentheses. I say ideal because in every organization, there are always some constraints in place. Call it regulation constraints, legal constraints, strategic direction, you name it, which may not allow for a full-blown agile methodology. And this is the case also with us in the EUIPO, but I will come later into this in more detail. So in this kind of management, following the agile principles, we pass from the plan-driven approach that we described before to a value-driven approach, focusing mostly on quick return of investment. In this case, time and cost are the fixed constraints, and what is, let's say, what varies is the scope, which, let's say, goes through continuous prioritization based on added value. Working in an iterative way and progress based on incremental working software releases, mostly it follows this kind of distribution of work. We have a lot of iterations, which are, let's say, mini SDLCs in the different phases. And this means that we have better chances that what we deliver is actually going to meet what the users wants, because the users have the chance to see the product, the system, call it as you like, as it evolves. So there are no big surprises in the end. Of course, this type of working requires lots of communication. Communication, let's say, is the key, is the crucial factor in this type of management methodology. And as far as the contractual aspect of outsourcing services, well, what about it? I mean, this is a big thing, especially in public organizations like us, but I will talk this in a separate slide, so bear with me about this topic. Now, where do we stand currently in our journey? This is the current Sdlc process that we have. And as you see, it follows a hybrid development model, which combines principles from waterfall and agile at the same time. So as you see here, first we start with the business, the architecture, and the quality requirements. And once these are defined, then we create a request for offer for the provider we have for the development services. And we start from that point and on delivering in an iterative and incremental manner. So we try to follow, let's say, a rolling wave approach, I would say. And we don't define the whole scope from the start. We just break the scope in smaller chunks so that it's easier to define one work package, give it for implementation, and then carry on with the specification of the second work package and so on. So this way we can have all the teams working in parallel at the same time, and we don't have big gaps between the various teams, waiting one team the input from the next team, from the previous team in the flow. There is always a final acceptance phase, site acceptance testing and user acceptance testing for the releases, the last increments that are going to go live. And let's say the end users are involved along the process with several demonstrations and even smaller user acceptance testing in the various iterations. And we have tried to reduce the documentation deliverables to the minimum possible. We cannot have zero documentation, of course, but we have managed to, let's say, decrease it considerably compared to the previous years where we had it extended documentation in place. Now, what about the contractual aspect? Something that I just mentioned a couple of slides before. Do we need to rethink the way we contract the services? What about, let's say, I guess that most of you that you read about Agile or even practice in Agile, you know that usually the best practice say that Agile methodology goes hand in hand with times and means, right? But what if you work in an organization that times and means is not the preferred option? Or not only it is not the preferred option, but it may not be allowed, let's say, to apply times and means. And this is the case actually with EUIPO. To be honest, in our case, we don't want to work on a body shopping mode, okay, where the provider just gives the resources and then they don't share any risk on the outcome. We want to build partnership relationships with our providers, and in a partnership, each side should, let's say, share part of the risk. It should not be the risk on the client side. That's why we don't want to go on the time and means. We used to work in a times and means basis some years back, and actually the results were not good. Let me tell you at this point that in EUIPO we have only in the IT department we have more than 30 providers, service providers, and okay, those related directly to the Sdlc, they are not 30, of course, they are 5, 6. But I'm talking about services regarding business analysis, architecture services, operations and DevOps services, development, software development services, and quality assurance and quality control services. The number of resources currently engaged in our outsourced services for IT, I'm talking about, exceed 500 FTEs. So it's a huge number. We have an army of external staff, let's say, working for us. And even if we wanted to work in a time and means basis, we wouldn't have the means to manage internally such a big group of individuals. For all these reasons, we prefer to work either in a fixed price mode, whenever this is possible, or in a quality times and means mode, where we always pay based on agreed deliverables and agreed scope and time and cost. So, what are the project scenarios that we work in EUIPO? First of all, we have projects that they have a relatively clear scope and functionalities and can be specified well right from the start of this DLC. In these cases, as I said before, we try to, let's say, contract services using the fixed price and fixed scope modality. And what we use as estimation method is function points. And we also have a fixed productivity ratio in place, which is part of our framework contracts. For another scenario that we have in terms of projects are what we call the technical or non-functional projects, for instance, migrations to new versions or migration of data from one system to the other, or refactoring of old system using new technologies. In this case, again, we can have a clear scope right from the start. And since there's no functionality involved, in these cases, we use, let's say, the bottom-up estimation model. And then, of course, there can be a third type of projects that they have a very high-level scope. The scope is not clear. We don't know what exactly we want to do, but we want to see how things will move on as we proceed. And of course, we cannot have a fixed scope, let's say, in place. And so in this case, we try to go with quality times and means, and we define small packages at the iteration level, to put it like that, and try to do a bottom-up approach, or even, again, try to apply the function points and the fixed productivity ratio, but in a reverse order. So once we deliver something, we can count how many function points this was, and then pay the amount based on the fixed productivity ratio. Now, let's highlight some of our day-to-day challenges concerning our IT-related operations. We have to manage, first of all, a very, very demanding workload, counting on a fixed capacity of internal staff. The Digital Transformation Department, which is the IT department of the organization, it relies on 100 internal FTEs. Okay, so we are not, it's not a small amount of people, of course, but it's quite big, it's quite small, I would say, sorry, for the type of workload that we have to cope with. Another challenge that we have is that, as I said, as we heavily depend on outsourcing of services, and this outsourcing happens offsite actually, we need to assure that the right level of information flows across our external providers, and that our external providers can actually cope with the expected workload. And this is not, of course, as we understand, an easy job, especially in an agile. When you want to work agile, as we said before, communication is crucial, and having the communication channels well defined in a very complex environment with different providers, different locations, is not the easiest task to manage. Moreover, we have to apply agile principles in a strictly project-based environment. As I mentioned in my introduction, EUIPO is structured in a projectized manner. And I'm not talking about the IT department only, but about the office overall. Every 5 years, we prepare a strategic plan, depending on the strategic direction and the strategic goals of the organization. And we allocate the budget in the form of an envelope for the implementation of the strategic plan. Once it is prepared, it is presented to the EUIPO national offices, following a consultation period. And of course, in the end, when it gets its final shape, the strategic plan is approved and published. So we're talking about a very formal process. The strategic plan is then broken down to programs, projects, and eventually there is a project budget for every project. And then we enter into the normal, let's say, methodology of PMI or Prince2 or the square that we have in the commission. And we have to prepare the project brief or project charter, define every project manager exactly what the project is supposed to deliver, what is the scope, the time, the benefits. And once it's approved, then the project is ready to start. So you understand what I mean from a projectized environment. All in all, then, we're talking about a plan-driven, fixed scope way of working, and this is not going to change soon, to be honest. So how do we apply the agile principles in such a traditionally projectized environment? And this is something that we'll discuss in the later slides. And last but not least, one of the biggest challenges we have, not only internally, but also with our providers, is how to manage different parallel activity streams, which in most cases are impacting the same products, the same systems. So we do have one stream, which is our strategic stream with the strategic projects. Then we have operational projects. We have adaptive maintenance, requests for offers, adaptive requests, and so on. And of course, the corrective maintenance, the last two being continuous activities. So this is where, let's say, the complexity starts. But let's come down to some practical issues in order for you to be able to better appreciate what I mean to say. In a typical scenario of a project in Scrum, since we are using Scrum, or we're trying to use Scrum in our development, agile development methodology, you normally have, let's say, this kind of composition. You have a project owner, you have a Scrum master, and you have the Scrum team. In a typical case of an EUIPO project, The roles involved in a project team are the following. We have a project manager, team leader, we have business analyst, we have architect, developer, we have QA specialist, and we have, of course, DevOps. Well, actually, it's a bit more complex than that. The actual real scenario composition in our project is the one that you see in this slide. So, as I said before, we have different service providers and we have different locations. So you see that, for instance, in the EUIPO site in Alicante, we have the internal staff working in a project, which is usually the project manager, an internal BA, an internal architect, and a coordinator of our DevOps operations. And also on site, we have business analysts and architects provided by our analysis service provider. More than that, we have analysts and architects outside in the offsite locations. We have our development provider, which in this case is Intrasoft, let's say working offsite in more than one environment, in more than one location. So actually they have 3-4 locations. And then we have another site in DevOps and another site for QA/QC. And in many cases, it's not even in the same country. We're talking about different countries here. So how easy is it to apply Agile principles in such a complex setup? Well, this is one of our challenges, let's say. And think that this kind of composition is then replicated across different projects. So the idea, let's say, is that we have different projects impacting the same systems in many cases. It's important to mention at this point that most of our software development scenarios, at least in the current strategic plan that started last year, and it will take us until 2025, concern incorporation of new capabilities and new features into existing products and less constructing of new products from scratch. We do have this case, of course, but mostly we're talking about extension of our existing products. So in this case, we do have, let's say, the role of the application manager in place, which is responsible for the coordination of the activities for each system. But this is not enough to guarantee that the information across all these teams flow well. And we have seen many cases where one PM doesn't know exactly the plan of another project manager. And in the end, both projects may be impacting the same system, and they don't even have a clear understanding on the release plan of this system. So it's a really complex situation that sometimes creates, let's say, unnecessary problems. And in order to show you the complete setup of our reality, which I believe it is the reality for many other organizations, public or private, is that we have different projects affecting different systems. And also at the same time, we have adaptive and corrective streams, which are more based on a Kanban approach. And we have to make all these people, all this different structure somehow communicate, let's say, effectively and applying Agile principles. So it's not an easy task. So actually, our challenge in the EUIPO is not just finding the correct way to introduce an Agile methodology, because this, up to some extent, we have made it happen, even in this hybrid mode that I explained some slides before. The process and the problems goes much beyond that. And this is where the discussion on the product development approach enters into the picture. So what do we mean by product development approach in the EUIPO? Imagine that we have a product X, okay? And for the sake of the discussion and to make things a bit simpler, let's assume that the product is a system. In reality, it's not like this, because sometimes the product is a set of systems that they, let's say, provide a common set of functionalities in one business line that we have. But anyway, for our discussion, to make things simpler, let's say that a product is one system. So what do we have here? We have one project A, that comes and adds new capabilities to this product, changing also some of the existing capabilities. We have at the same time another project, the project B, which comes and adds also some new features and capabilities, changing some part of the existing ones. Another project C that comes and adds on top some other business operations. And at the same time, we have adaptive work happening continuously with small bits and pieces here and there. And of course, we have the corrective work in all the delivered functionality, the existing one plus the new functionality that's delivered and is rolled out. So how are we going trying to handle this complexity of parallel activity streams? Let's imagine that we have again the same product text, and here now we enter also the timeline into the picture. And here are the different projects, right? So project A has its own timeline, project B has its own timeline, project C the same, every project has its own budget also. We have the adaptive work and then the corrective. The way we're trying to set up, let's say, our processes internally, and also the way we're trying to set up the teams with our external providers is to work on a product-based approach. So to build teams which are horizontal working at the product level. And then we try to mix and match the product backlogs of the different projects in a common product backlog. So let's say we have this kind of features or enables that each project or each activity is going to introduce. And then there is one team that is working, let's say, horizontally, vertically, horizontally. I think I'm missing something here. I think, let's say horizontally in this case. The iterations, they start working on iteration. As I said, we have sprints, and we're trying to mix and match, as I said before, functionalities from all different backlogs. So at some point, at the end of the iteration, the development team, or all the teams basically, along with the providers, all the providers, DevOps, testing, etc., they will deliver something covering this kind of scope that you see on this line. Then after 3 weeks, currently we're working on a 3-week iteration model, there will be yet another incremental release, and so on and so forth. So the idea is, as soon as we have one chunk, one complete feature, let's say, ready to be rolled out, to have, let's say, some releases on demand that can go live. And we try also to set up this notion of what we call here product increment, where, let's say, representatives of all these different activities, they sit together and try to, let's say, plan ahead 3, 4, 5 iterations. It depends on the case. So we end up having, let's say, a daily plan, an iteration plan, a product increment plan, and above all, we have what we call product roadmap, which is one of the most important, let's say, artifacts that we are currently working on. So coming back to the visual representation of the product text, following this product development approach, first, there will be a release at some point that releases part of the features. Then there will be another release that adds up some more features and make them available to the user, and so on and so forth, until all the different, let's say, capabilities are added to the product. And then the product scope, let's say, scope is different one in terms of the features. Okay, so this is the idea that we're trying to apply in practice. So what are the benefits of combining this agile development with the product management that I was, let's say, trying to briefly explain? First of all, we have faster delivery of product features in productions, and this results in an increased return of investment, and also helps us a lot to build trust between the IT and the business side, because the business now, they can see things that they are ready to be used. They are not waiting a couple of years until they see something. And also it builds up trust between us and our external providers, because we, as long as we see a progress proven based on the deliverables, then of course this helps a lot in our partnership relationship. More than that, it offers better change and risk management, exactly because we keep building and, let's say, demonstrating that things are working and are moving in the right direction. It offers for better management of priorities and interdependencies at the product level. You understand that there are many cases where we have, let's say, a competition between the different projects. And with this type of working, this kind of prioritization can work much better and also offers transparency across all levels of the organization. It's not only a matter of the IT department, as you understand. Moreover, it offers increased efficiency and resource management, both for us and for the external providers, not only resources in terms of human resources, but also resources in terms of environments, maintaining environments in our case, and I guess this is the same case for many others that they have complex landscapes in terms of IT systems, is quite a cumbersome task with lots of effort, let's say, spent there. This type of model of work, it's not that, of course, it takes out all these problems. No, this cannot happen. It would be, let's say a dream to say that this doesn't happen, but surely it removes some of the complexity. And of course, one of the benefits of this type of working is that it offers improved quality and continuous team learning. Improved quality because we test it continuously, in an iterative mode, and of course, continuous team learning because iteration after iteration, all the people involved from all the service providers, all the teams, they can build up knowledge. And normally we start always slow, but after, let's say, the middle of after the half of the sprints that have been planned, normally the productivity increases quite considerably, I would say. So, as I mentioned already at the beginning of my presentation, we are not there yet. Okay, I mean, this is a big transformation journey, and there are many things still that we have to tackle, many challenges ahead of us. For one, we have to refine further our agile development process, and of course, do this in collaboration with our service providers. There are, of course, problems when you have to coordinate so many different teams and make them work as one team, although there are different contracts in place, different locations, different companies, etc. This is, let's say, something that it requires continuous effort. So this is one of the things that we are spending much of our effort trying to keep, let's say, the alignment level as high as possible. Moreover, we have to increase synergies further among the interdependent projects. I talked already about combined product backlogs, iteration plans, release plans, and so on and so forth. But let's say there is room for improvement there, definitely. And this is something that we're trying to sort out, always in collaboration with our service providers. We have to keep looking for better options and formulas in the contractual aspect of the outsourced services. I already mentioned, let's say, some of our the ways that we're trying to manage at least the development work. But of course, there are things that sometimes work fine, sometimes they don't work fine. So we're in a continuous process of updating our, let's say, ordering process and contractual aspects. What we are currently working on, and this is one of the key factors in this type of working, is to define visual roadmaps for all our products and use them as the main means of prioritization, alignment, and communication across all hierarchical levels of the organization, but also across all the stakeholders, internal and external. Because in the end, everything should start from the roadmap and going down. It shouldn't be the opposite. And currently, I mean, in the last, at least in all these 9 years that I've been working in the office, we never had a very clear roadmap at the level of the products. We're always, let's say, being directed from the projects. And this is something that we really need to change. We have now to introduce the role of the product manager in the picture as you saw, we talked about application manager, but this is not the same thing. We need to have the role of the product manager, and we really need to involve the colleagues from the business side to fill in this role, or part of this role, to put it like that. And the products should always be driven by our business needs. And eventually, the ultimate goal that we have in this transformation journey is to change the chip at the organization level I'm talking about, and move from managing projects towards managing products, opting for delivery of capabilities based on the value added of each capability and on the added value and on the quick return of investment. So, coming back to this $1 million question, whether Agile is, let's say, possible in the European public sector, personally, I would say that yes, it is. We already have made use of the Agile principle, as I mentioned before, even the hybrid mode. But Agile, it comes in different flavors. There isn't such thing as one solution fits everything. The extent of agility that every organization, let's say, can apply should be eventually adapted and tailored to the specific needs and constraints. And by constraints, again, I mean regulatory constraints, legal constraints, strategic direction constraints, capacity of the external providers, you name it. Every organization is a world of its own, right? As a closing remark, in my humble opinion, the full potential of Agile development principles can be achieved when they are combined with the principles of product management. And trust me, this change can be even more disruptive for any type of organization, not only public, private as well, since it requires a complete different mindset in the way we perceive things. And in new situations, it requires also internal reorganization and restructuring, which is always a very complex and delicate task, as you can understand. So this is what I wanted to mention in my presentation today, and I hope that at least I was capable to pass on some of our messages, that you could, let's say, appreciate our problems and the way we're trying to tackle them. And of course, if you have any questions, I would be very glad to take it. Thank you.
Yes, we do have quite some questions, actually. So let's start from the first one, which is, do you have a supportive or controlling PMO that can help you?
The IT governance team is the PMO in this case. So yes, the team that I manage, in the end, since we manage projects, budgets, resources, etc., it's the PMO. But we have also a corporate governance service. So let's say we have one PMO at the level of the full organization and another PMO at the level of the IT. The one that is driving the change currently is the one coming from us. That's why also we are called the Digital Transformation Department. It's part of our, let's say, of our mission, to put it like that.
Okay. Another question is, how is people workload handled if people are working on various projects? In other words, how is prioritization facilitated?
We, at the level of the organization, we have a system which is called task allocation, and the task allocation is, let's say, defined at the level of each project brief. So when we have project briefs, one of the areas of the project brief is to define the resources, not only resources in terms of budget, but also in terms of internal staff use. So the way we work is that we define the needs for all the projects, and then we try to allocate real persons to the different, let's say, projects based on the allocation that is expected. And for that reason, we maintain a capacity plan, and we try always to manage the needs. Of course, when we start with the definition, let's say the drafting of the strategic plan, usually the needs are 2 eyes or 3 eyes of our capacity. That's why I mentioned that one of our constraints and challenges is our internal capacity. And as it happens in the public organization, recruiting is not an easy thing. It's actually is a very complex and very time-consuming task. We're not like the private sector that can hire people whenever they want. In us, we have to follow a very, let's say, well-defined engagement plan of the office, etc., etc. So we always have to minimize and manage the priorities in the best way that we, as internal staff, can manage.
Okay. Another question is, I had the understanding that Kanban has no iterational sprint.
The Kanban, it's a different methodology. It's not Agile as such, right? It's not Scrum, to put it like that. But since we want to work on a product level across, we need somehow to be able to work in parallel, doing adaptations of new, let's say, capabilities and corrections, because we want to maintain one, let's say, release plan. So it doesn't mean, of course, that we have, even with the providers that we are discussing, in most cases, they have, let's say, two teams. One team is working mostly on adaptations, projects, even adaptive maintenance, and another team doing corrective. But those teams are always working hand in hand so that we try to make the configuration management as simple as possible. We don't want to maintain 1 million branches and then, let's say, having to cope with different code merges and a lot of regression testing and so on and so forth. So yes, Kanban is not part of the iteration approach, but it is part of the release plan, which is we try to have it one release plan in common for our products.
Okay. Then another question is, do I understand correctly that your deliver value for different project is one sprint?
Yes, this is the target.
Okay.
We are not there, as I said, fully. This is the idea. And last year, we managed to do this for some cases, not for all. But the target for this year is exactly to move in this direction. And actually, this year, we have some big projects where this problem is much more evident. And that's why we're currently spending all our efforts with our service providers to work in this model. Yes, so every iteration is supposed to give value for different activity streams.
Another question is, are you splitting the application in microservices in order to allow teams to be involved in various projects? How do you identify and manage the interdependencies?
Yes, let's say our architecture, as it has been defined over the last 2-3 years, is based on the use of microservices. And in the beginning, we started doing microservices in a very, which we're trying to make reuse of microservices. And we finally found out that this was a problematic, let's say, scenario. So now we're trying to go a bit one step back and have more loose coupled microservices. So this means that in many cases, we have to replicate code into different microservices, which may mean more difficult maintenance management. But on the other hand, it makes, let's say, this product development approach easier to handle. And exactly, we can have sub-teams working in parallel in different microservices without one affecting the other. The dependencies are managed at the level of the roadmaps, or this is our target at least. So when we define the different features at the level of the product roadmaps, we try to identify also the types of interdependence that we have between products, at the product level, but also between products. Because in many cases, we may work on a product X, and unless we finish the work there, we cannot proceed with a feature in a product Z, to set it like that. So, well, dependencies, this is one of the most difficult and complex tasks, of course. We're not, let's say, it's not that we have sorted out this problem completely, but we are working on it. That's it. And the roadmaps and this product in the increments help us quite a lot in this.
I would say that this is a common issue even outside of public sector.
Of course, not public sector. I think everywhere, even
Yeah,
for
no, outside
companies that they are doing products, they have this kind of problems.
Yeah. Another question is related to team morale and culture. What are the location of your team members? Are they co-located or dispersed in the EU? And how do you keep team morale and culture on the required level?
I think I covered that, but let me repeat this. We work. I mean, the internal staff of EUIPO, we are all located in one site, the main site we have here in Alicante. But as far as the providers are concerned, we have very few, let's say, individuals, FTEs in our inside, let's say, premises. Well, very few, no, there may be 100, but compared to the 500 people that they are getting in our outsourcing services, it's a small number. As far as the providers, as I said before, they are located in different sites. We have a lot of providers coming from Spain. We have providers from Greece, Intrasoft in this case, that they have their own set of locations in Athens, Patra, wherever else. We have providers now from Brussels, from Portugal. So more or less, we have providers from everywhere. And about the morale, well, I cannot answer about the morale in general because we try not to intervene in this. That's why we want to work in a service mode. We don't want to work in time and minutes exactly for that. This is for every service provider to manage on their own resources. So I think this question is mostly for the service providers to answer.
Another question is, how do you manage products where not all interdependent projects are agile?
Well, not all. Well, look, as far as the development, let's say, phase is concerned, we're trying to work agile in all of them. Okay, so if you remember this hybrid approach, in all projects, in all of our activities, even for smaller requests for changes, we try to set this iterative mode. Okay, so in principle, agile principles are in all our projects, at least for the development point of view. Where we don't have agile principles put is before at the prioritization level, etc. That's why we try to, let's say, promote this product development approach.
Yeah.
And well, in some cases, well, yes, it's not possible, but in the end, everywhere it's possible as long as you get the buy-in from the top management. Okay, so that's why I mentioned at some point that there is, let's say, a competition between different projects at some point. So it's a matter of making clear what the priorities are at the organization level, and have the buy-in from the top management to say, look, we'll be working in this feature for each, let's say, different project, because these are the ones that we really need to go first with. And of course, this creates some problems since we are a projectized environment and we are following, let's say, at the project management methodologies, the traditional approach. It means that we have some bureaucracy involved. We have to prepare project exception report if the scope is not managed properly, or we need more money, or the time lapses. But in the end, personally, I prefer to deliver faster the things that the office needs than to have perfect projects and not perfect results. You know, this is a balance always.
Yeah.
Maybe present again in 2-3 years. When I will have, let's say, more tangible results, and
we will be there.
If this works out fine or not.
It will be a pleasure to see the evolution. Another question, and I will take it as the last one. Are you aware of the disciplined agile approach, and are you considering it?
Me personally, I'm not. I know, of course, things from the disciplined agile principle, but I'm more knowledgeable of the SAFe, let's say, the scaling agile framework. But maybe some of the terminologies that you saw there, they are more close, they are closer to this SAFE framework, I would say.
Yeah.
But again, yes, Agile at scale, at some point, exactly is supposed to sort out these problems that we are facing. But, and of course, at some point, Agile and product management, they have too many things in common, but they are not the same thing in the end. There are some, let's say, differences there, especially when it comes to, for me, to the roadmaps and the management of the prioritization at the top management level.
Yeah. But as a discipline Agile, for the level I have, is more about choosing the correct way to manage the project. So you may end up in having a traditional approach for that part of the team of the project. So this is something that probably you're already on it and you just don't have the, how can I say, the vocabulary to explicit it. For those who are much more curious about the discipline of Agile, there are other sessions in this week that will help you discover the toolkit and the methodologies and the activities that are behind this. I think it's time for us to wrap up. So I would like to thank you for your time and for your attention, and I will leave it to Nasos to close the session.
Thank you, Liz. So let me again share with you, and I will send to everybody the today's code for earning your PDUs, and I will share it right away. Okay, and also let me share my screen. Okay, so let us help say a thank you again to our sponsor Intersoft and to our partner Alvision for this Agile Week that you are hoping that you are enjoying. And don't forget our special offer for Alvision for the training courses that are being offered. And there is a 10% off for all members that would like to follow them. And thank you to the sponsors of our chapter for being there. Price, the Chambre de Commerce of the Luxembourg, Deloitte, Inf Europe, and EY for also supporting our chapter to provide all these trainings and sessions to you guys. If anybody's or company is willing to be sponsoring our events or getting, sponsoring our chapter and what we do, it would be great to have you here. Don't forget that we have also 2 very interesting sessions tomorrow. That would be great for you to join the same time. And the first one is again about disciplined Agile. And the second has also have to do with practicing Agile in the public sector. So I hope that we will be able to see you again tomorrow and the coming days. Thank you, Kostas, very much for being here with us today. And we enjoyed very much your presentation and all the information that you shared.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
And I hope to have you again, maybe in 2-3 years to share successes.
If it is successful, I will be here. If not, don't count on me.
If it's not successful, we're going to learn,
Yeah, it's going to be lesson learned.
Yes, lesson
retrospective. So thank you, everybody, very much for being with us today, and hope to see you again in the coming sessions.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye, bye, bye.
Bye, everybody.